Hey cats, it's Ed, half marathon bud here. I have to be honest, I'm a little bit tuckered out. It's time for another 100 mile shoe update for you, this time the ASICS SUPERBLAST. I hear only good things from other runners and viewers of the channel about this shoe, though it does appear that ASICS only produce it in very short supply, because it's always sold out in the common sizes. No sign of a V2 yet, so I beg the question, is it still worth picking up the ASICS SUPERBLAST in 2024? Let's find out. Welcome back to the channel, people. I always appreciate you tuning in, so thanks. Do help us though to continue to grow by hitting that subscribe button, but also giving this video a thumbs up like. You know it makes sense. Dankeschön. I got about 284 grams or bang on 10 ounces in my ASICS SUPERBLAST in a UK size 11. US size 12. It certainly is one of the widest forefoots in any shoe that I've got in my collection right now. There's about 13 centimeters of width under the forefoot, and there's about 10 centimeters in the heel, so there's certainly a lot of surface area there. I think certainly in the heel you've almost got like 2 centimeters more than something like the Adidas Takumi Sen 10. So it's quite amazing that ASICS have kept the weight down below 300 grams for me in my size. Most max cushion shoes of this ilk are well over 300 grams for me. Like the Nimbus 26, for example, is up towards like 350 grams, so you get the picture. There's a big stack of midsole material here, 45.5 millimeters in the heel, then 38 millimeters in the forefoot. It's a truly big stack and one that's only eclipsed by something like the Adidas Primex Strung. There is though a double stack of foam here. If you don't know anything about the shoe, we've got the premium flight foam turbo here on the top. That's very airy, think a meringue, and then you've got the denser layer of Flight Foam Blast Plus. I don't think this is the eco version. It does feel a little bit different to the stuff we've seen in more recent ASICS shoes using that foam. Oh, I'm really on form today. It's a bit weird, really. Go out and run around the countryside in the Blackmore Vale. You'd think you'd be tired and a bit exhausted, but I feel great. It's like all the countryside air, the manure, the dung, and all that sort of stuff. It, you know, gets rid of all the toxins or so. I don't know, I'm just jesting. I did measure the foams here in terms of short A softness. The Flight Foam Blast stuff is 28, which it pretty much is always, and the Flight Foam Turbo stuff comes in about 23, which is a bit under average. We will start with the upper first, because that's where we always start, and that seems like a good idea. After 100 miles in the shoe, I do feel the upper is a little bit perhaps on the roomy side. Just noticing that the upper makes my camera go a bit weird. It almost looks like it's like a pencil drawn style or something. Can you see that? It's a thin engineered mesh here, and I do feel perhaps you could go down a half size and still get away with it. You don't have to wildly cinch the laces in though. It just feels like it's got a little bit too much room here in the toe box. The thin laces, and I can see why they've included them because they're very light, won't be for everybody. There's not an awful lot of stretch to them, though you do have some partial gusseting on each side of the tongue to stop it sliding around. The laces are a little bit on the long side as well in the SUPERBLAST. You know I love me a bit of tongue padding, and we got some here on the business end of the tongue. There's just enough there to make sure there's no lace pressure at the top eyelets. I've used a runner's knot to make sure this one stays locked in, and it's one of the better shoes from that perspective. The upper's actually mega simple when you think about it. We do have a traditional heel counter back here, bit of a pull tab, can't say I've ever needed to use it, and the rest of it's just standard eyelets, a little bit of ventilation here in the tongue. The material itself is very thin, there's only a couple of mil to it, though it's proven very durable over time and exceptionally easy to clean as well. There's absolutely no wear aside from a tiny little bit back here in the heel collar. It's been very comfortable in terms of the upper. I'm going to give it a 2.8 out of 3 after 100 miles for the upper. Almost nothing to dislike here. Midsole, midsole, midsole now. So the magic combo of foams here is very hard not to enjoy, and it's hard not to like. It's got a hollow feel really, rather than a dense one that you get in the Nimbus 26. More pop and cushion. It's just generally a bit more of a fun shoe to wear than the Novablast 4. The real feel here though is from that Flight Foam Turbo material. I love it in the Metaspeed Sky Plus. I think I've got my 10k PR in that shoe. It's very resilient, it's very light. but the one downside of it is that it isn't that durable in the Metaspeed Sky Plus. Here though, we've got protection from the Flight Foam Blast Plus, so it means that the business foam doesn't get damaged, and you've got this other sort of cannon fodder foam underneath. I found it a great shoe over any distance really for some recovery efforts, easier pace running. It's okay for some steady stuff. If you want to take it out for a long run, it's great, though I think the wide midsole surface area here is actually a bit of an Achilles heel of the shoe. It just means it's not great for the more nimble sessions where you're aiming at improving your top speeds. I think that's implied as well with this sort of built up section around the heel of the shoe and around the sidewall here, certainly round by the arch. You do have quite a bit of excess sort of Flight Foam turbo material that's designed to sort of guide the foot when you hit the floor. Now this shoe is certainly cushioned, but I wouldn't suggest it's a squashy ride. It's not like a sort of quicksand, invincible run type feel. There is a bit of response there if needed, and I think you can do some tempo running perhaps, maybe up to sort of half marathon pace, but I don't really think it's the ideal shoe for like 5k or 10k type effort. Almost a more responsive, maximalized version of the Nova Blast 4. So I think if you like that shoe, then I think you could probably put this one into your rotation alongside it. It's just less weight in the upper and the midsole here of the Superblast versus the Nova Blast 4. Certainly feels best for me at steady or easy paces. Not saying you can't run those faster sessions in it, but I think it could be superb if you're marathon training. It just ticks lots of boxes there for all the different sessions that you might need to run. Midsole feels absolutely superb still after 100 miles or 160 kilometers. I have heard from viewers that have used these up to like 5 or even 800 kilometers. So in terms of cost, I actually think it could be a bit of a bargain. Does lots of things that like 3 other pairs of shoes could do all in one. It's a bit like an Elvis all in one with a big falcon on the back. Durability wise, there's a little bit of creasing of the midsole. I mean, it's not terrible by any extent. I think it actually helps having this sort of patterned sort of section, and a little bit of creasing on the medial side here too. Absolutely great combo, and I can kind of see why ASICS haven't bothered to do a Superblast 2 yet. You just don't need to. Well, aside from changing up some other aspects, I'll talk about that in a sec. I'm going to give this a 2.8 out of 3 for me after 100 miles in the midsole. Versatile marathon training option, absolutely. Outsole now. Now, outsole is where I do have some issues with the Superblast. Stones, gravel, it just keeps getting caught up in these holes, these cutouts here in the exposed midsole. It's a problem that never really goes away, and anytime you're near anything like that in terms of your run, it seems to magnetize itself to the shoe. A few times I've got some particularly large ones stuck in and had to leave them out mid-run, but most of the time they get compacted into the cutouts and have to be ejected later on. Now, could they stop this somehow? Is there a way they could get around it? Maybe some larger cutouts possibly, or maybe they could sort of chamfer the actual cutouts a little bit. The rubber on the newer ASICS models does seem to be switched up a little bit from what we had on the Superblast. I think ASICS know why. It has actually worn down quite a bit here in the forefoot area, and the pattern's practically gone on the lateral side here in the heel. I mean, there's loads of rubber left, but it's getting quite smooth, and it's not really doing the shoe any favours in terms of traction and grip. On smooth surfaces it can be a little bit poor, in fairness. It's not really a shoe I like wearing on concrete when it's very wet underfoot. You can feel yourself sliding a little bit, and that does also diminish the sort of toe off and push off that you get from the shoe. The Flight Foam Blast Plus is taking a bit of a pounding here in the exposed midsole areas. There's a lot of discoloration, there's a lot of creasing as well. It also does feel quite soft as well, where it's taken a bit of a pounding over the first 100 miles, but clearly they're utilising that part of the foam to help stick the rubber to it. I think there's perhaps a bit more adhesion from that foam rather than the Flight Foam Turbo. I think if you're running on road and concrete, you'll be absolutely fine. Just avoid the edges of the road where you tend to get a lot of debris. Those rocks and stones will no doubt start chasing you down. So not perfect from an outsole perspective, sadly. I expect something from the Superblast 2. In the outsole department, perhaps a little bit closer to the Nimbus 26 or the Keanu 30. It's not so much the amount of rubber here, but the pattern that they've utilised and the positioning of the rubber. I shall give the outsole of the Superblast a 2.6 out of 3 after 100 miles. value now. Now, the shoe does retail at £195 here in the UK, and I rarely see any discounts on it. It's one of those shoes that never ever pops up as being a candidate for the old running shoe bargains, and there will be one of those tomorrow, by the way. It also seems to be a shoe that sells out very quickly, so clearly fans are out there of the shoe. They just seem to do another colourway and try to satisfy the demand with that, and there appears to be a considerable amount of demand. This pair I think will last another few 100 miles. It feels just as good as it did out of the box, perhaps even better, and when you do the calculations, actually that's not really that bad. There's certain daily shoes you can buy for like 100 quid and they're toast within 200 miles. This will go on for ages. I think it can do the job of 2 or 3 pairs of shoes as well, and if you tot the costs up, it's actually a bit of a bargain, actually. Just a bit easier to stomach at £195 when it will do the job of many other shoes in the rotation. You can buy a pair of Pegasus 40s for like 83 quid. That'll cover your daily runs, maybe some Brooks Ghost Max for another 140. You're already there, aren't you? You're already there. As such, I view this shoe as a bit of a Swiss Army clog. Bags of ways you can utilise it within your training, especially if you're getting ready for a marathon. When you look at the price from afar, yes, it's a super trainer and it's highly priced, but the super racers are even more these days and perhaps not even as good as this shoe. So if you want surface area and you want something that's going to hold up over time, I think the Superblast is a really good option. Light, fun and forgiving. I'll give it a 2.7 out of 3 for value after 100 miles. I just wouldn't recommend trying to do 100 or 200 meter repeats in it. It's just not that sort of shoe. If I've totaled the scores up correctly for the ASICS Superblast at 100 miles, I've got a 10.9 out of 12. Just some thin laces and better outsole rubber patterning positioning, and maybe some outsole carving as well, away from being an absolutely superb shoe. What are your thoughts on the ASICS Superblast? Is it one that you really enjoy utilising in your training, or did you get it and just not see what the hype was all about? Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments. Very quick musical interlude for you. I've been back listening to Nick Drake. I find it hard to believe that a lot of his material was released sort of 69 and 70. It still stands up today. It sounds wonderful in terms of the production and the overall sound. It hasn't aged at all, very classic. My favourite's got to be Brighter Later at the Chime of the City Clock. That song is just beautiful. Has this wonderful jazzy vibe about it. Real warmth there, but they do also manage to generate a bit of that sort of cold, harsh feeling of the city. Almost imagine Nick Drake sort of looking out of the window and examining what's going on around him. People go in here, people go in there. And as somebody who'd perhaps been living somewhere that was a bit more sheltered in the country to the city, it was probably quite a big leap for him. I think Brighter Later is really known as the sort of city or more urban album. But the instrumental pieces on that always, to me, sound like they could have been recorded in a forest. Weasels and stoats leaping about, you know. Got to watch out for those stoats, very sharp teeth. Go and check it out, Brighter Later, and the song At the Chime of the City Clock by Nick Drake. Thanks for tuning in, people. Hope you enjoyed today's review. Please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up like. My name's EDDBUD, and I'll be seeing you